welcome to this edition of First the Citizens. Today on First the Citizens, we are digging up something that is now all too common to many students in this country. The issue is COVID-19 and its impact on education. Now, some 15 million young people are seated at home. Why? Because the president on the 18th of March was, in a way, sending them all packing without much more ado to go home because of the pandemic. They argued that there was necessity for these young people to be home to lessen the risk. But today, 3 months later, we need to ask, are we headed in the right direction? And to help us understand and unpack the impact of COVID-19 on our education as a country, we have an able panel. Perhaps before we go to them, I need to mention that our own audience is socially distancing because of the challenges of the pandemic itself. So it's not only education, but we'll talk education for this now. Today, we will be discussing with a panel what the impact of COVID-19 has been on the education sector. And to introduce my panel now, help me welcome Honorable Abbas Agaba, the Member of Parliament representing Chitagwenda County in Chitagwenda District. Probably new for many of you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Also help me welcome Dr. Kedres Turiajenda, the Director for Education Standards in the Ministry of Education and Sports.
Good afternoon, viewers.
Thank you. We are also welcoming Mr. Patrick Kaboyo, the National Secretary of the Federation of Non-State Education Institutions. You're very welcome, sir.
Thank you and good afternoon.
Introducing last but by no means least, the Honorable Member for Kumi Municipality, Mr. Honorable Agon Silas. You're very welcome, sir.
Thank you.
To start this off, we'll be discussing with a bit of detail on what has now become a ravaging on our education system. But to help you understand what's happening here, as you can see, there is enough social distancing on the panel, as is in our audience with a quarter of the capacity we usually have, to ensure that the guidelines that are being implemented in the country are actually being followed to the letter, even here. We'll start with where it has been implemented the most, the Ministry of Education and Sports. And I'll start with you, Dr. Kedres Turiajenda. Was there any need to close schools when there was no case in the schools at the time?
Thank you, Moderator Jacob. Mm-hmm. Yes, there was a great need at the time because it was evident across the world by then that COVID-19 had arrived. Okay. We hadn't got a case yet, but there was every indicator that it had arrived, not only in East Africa, but across the entire African continent and also most of the world by that time. And because of the way COVID-19 spreads, the closeness, the interaction, and so on, the schools were the most soft target that could easily get in there. So we thought that was quite appropriate.
Okay, but you have 15 million young Ugandans in schools, organized environments, where you could check the coming in and the going out. Did we really have to close those if we can check the coming in and the going out?
Well, we weren't even sure that even those who were in were safe at that time.
Okay.
Suppose one was already infected, asymptomatic, and then you have, some schools have 2,000 children, and then you have at your hands 500 of them sick. What would we do? So I thought that was the right decision.
All right, thank you. Let's take it to Parliament a bit, and there's been some noise on many fronts for this endeavor being taken against COVID. Honorable Silas, and we are going to talk largely about the impact of this address we've made for education on the reach in the country. All schools are closed, but it seems like some schools are continuing by way of television, by way of internet study. How do you, as a Member of Parliament for Kumi, think that is appropriate?
First of all, my opinion is that this one is sort of creating academic apartheid.
Okay.
Yes, where you're having a lot of segregation between the rich and the poor, between the urban and the rural, the remote and the near. So I think we need to focus on issues of equal opportunities. That is where the gap is. Yeah.
Okay, so just to keep with you there, when you say academic apartheid, are you saying that they are actually killing some educational aspirations of anyone?
That is it.
Because schools will resume.
You see, my problem is that for those who have access to TV, those who have access to radio,
Yes.
those who have access to big money, they have the opportunity even to study online. Those who have access to internet. But what will happen to my common person from Ukumi,
Okay.
from the remotest part of Ukumi, who even has not seen what they call WhatsApp?
Okay.
They have not even seen. They have just heard,
Yes.
but they have never used.
Okay.
The basic phone they have is ITEL. This one of 35,000
Okay.
in Kampala. What is the opportunity they have? There is no equalizer. So I'm happy that the Ministry of Education is represented here. Our problem is about equal opportunities for everybody across the country.
All right.
What are you doing about this? Through these budgetary interventions, you are planning, the current planning, the prior planning. And I believe the Ministry of Education had a focus that disasters are likely to occur. Didn't you foresee this? What did you do? What are you doing? What are you about to do?
Thank you. Honorable Abbas, just speaking it from there, government has actually not sat idly by. Government has been able to inject some sort of plan to have access to learning materials for learners in the villages. Government, if I quote rightly, has been able to say they're incorporating the LC system and having some form of homeschooling. There's an initiative to involve the New Vision in supply of learning materials. Is this not the equalizer that Honorable Salas is talking about?
Well, thank you. You're discussing a question of equity versus equality.
Okay.
We are all parents. I mean, all of us here. And I'm sure we now feel the effect of having the children home during school. They need to be occupied. For all intents and purposes, there must be something to occupy these kids when they are with us at home. For those who are staying with them, I mean, we even jump out a little as members of parliament to do national work, but we go back and stay with them. Now we're able to go to the constituencies. I see what is happening there. While I agree that there's a discrepancy in terms of levels of development and access to amenities, I disagree that we should stop any efforts that are meant to occupy our children while they're out of school. Okay. There should be a plan for those who can't access the current IT expertise that is being used. Yes. But there should be, I agree with the effort to occupy them. I asked the Minister of Education on the floor of the House, the Minister of State for Higher Education. Yes. Is the current coverage, the material being sent on phones, on the TVs, on the radios to teach those children, is it meant to cover the curriculum that they are supposed to have covered, or when we resume school, they will start from where they ended? And the answer he gave on the floor of the House is that we are currently trying to occupy the children as much as we can. Okay. So to me, even when you have not attended the classes they are attending, you are not missing anything in the curriculum, because when you return, they will start from where they ended. However, there should be an effort to reach out to people. When I went to the constituency, yes, study materials had been sent, but you have one copy for the whole village, for the whole parish. So as a member of parliament, I had to make an effort with some other people to photocopy, yes, and then try to reach out to as many as we can. So yes, further government should take care of this, try as much as possible to reach everybody at home. But it's not fair to stop any efforts that are in. For those who can access the materials on WhatsApp, the materials on internet, the materials on radio, let them access them. But let's move down deeper to access everybody. Right. Because if you discourage the efforts being made, for me, as long as the e-learning does not cater for the coverage of the curriculum that they are supposed to cover, and have the promise, which is the guarantee, that when schools resume, you start from where we ended. I'm comfortable. Let's start from where we are. Everybody should do something too. Even me, what I get on WhatsApp from other schools, yes, when I print it, I go down to my village schools, Mugombo and others, to try and share the material, that they also get a feel of what is happening in Kampala.
Let's keep it there. I would like to come back to Dr. Turiagenda. The assumption now that we are hearing is that this is possibly a waste of time or an occupation of time, that it is not important to be on TV or try to learn anyway, since we are going to resume from where we stopped, then why does the ministry go out of its way to ask? Why does the ministry go out of its way to make sure there's allocation to providing materials to the parish level and so on, if this can wait and the children in the villages go digging?
Thank you, Jacob. I think learning is never wasted.
Okay.
Even this afternoon, we are learning. What the three of us so far have said, we have learned. So learning is a continuous process, and it's a lifetime process. Actually, the writers seem to say that you start learning at conception, right inside your mother's womb. Okay. There is no classroom there for you to learn, but you are learning something. So it's not a waste. And when our children are learning, and I'm glad my brother from Kumi has mentioned, because of the environment in which they live, even when you are in P3, you may not have the concepts of P1 or P2. Not because of COVID, but because of very many other circumstances that surround our communities. And so the first attempt, because as you said, when we had the closure, we thought it was a short time. And so we thought after the first 2 weeks, life will come back to normal. No, it wasn't coming. It was coming to 1 month. And then we thought, no, we cannot allow children, because at that time, there were still attempts from the cities, as my brother said, who are trying to teach. Some of the schools were sending materials on internet to their learners. Some were learning from television, although there are a number of challenges of some of the teachers on television. I've watched some of them. And then some were learning, like the Central of Uganda here, they had something on radio. So some learning was happening. So as a sector, we said, no, this is not right. Our commitment as a sector is quality education for all. Now, if only a small percentage who can access TV, and I think statistics show that it's about 15 to 20, and a few from Uganda can access, that's not right. So we agreed that we should have a harmonized system, organized for materials in the curriculum through National Curriculum Development Center. And this now should go out to everybody. It's at that point that we brought in the radio, because the thinking then was that more than 70% of our population can actually listen in on radio. And then we thought there could be some actually who may not even access the radio. So we agreed, let's also, apart from what is being taught on TV and radio, let's also have self-study print material, which will go to the child in the home. And that's how it came. And as he said, he's right. We are not able to print for everyone. So it has had its challenges, and we've had questions. But we are learning from it. And that will inform how we can improve the system.
All right, let's hold now to Mr. Kaboyo. And I think that the setup so far is that, well, there is an engagement. It has been inclusive, according to the Ministry of Education here. But I would like to understand how you say it, because the inclusion that we have had is that there is a parish level print, okay? So it's one print per parish, probably about 300 students. Then the inclusion is also that they have gone to radio, but that schedule is also supposed to be followed if you're going to actually attend class. That inclusion has also included the idea that it's not for everyone, it's for people who want to keep busy. Do you think this framework is a right redress for the loss of education time?
Thank you, Jacob, viewers and colleague panelists. I think for me, we have to get out of the box and think differently, because COVID offers us a new paradigm. When we talk about education during COVID, we need to bring it out in terms of bigger picture and not remove it from the national perspective where we're talking about proper planning. When you listen to the members of parliament, they have talked about issues that touch on poverty in the countryside. And of course, if you are poor, you cannot access a smartphone. And if the community is poor, you'll find that the connectivity for electricity, be it solar, is not there, meaning that students have no lighting system. But also, you will not distance that from the challenge of television, connectivity, and radio network. Oftentimes when you are in the countryside, you see people trying to raise poles and put some funny things up there to get the signal. But also the signal is not there. Meaning that for us to fix this e-learning process, it has to be concurrent. Expect teams now in the Ministry of ICT and at planning level to have done a rapid assessment to see what is the TV network coverage countrywide, because every home is spread across the country. What about radio stations? There are areas in Kabong, like in Karamoja, you may be interfered with the waves of the Kenyan radio network, and the children are not able to capture what is available.
So, Mr.
But also,
Kawore,
finally,
yes,
in terms of the material, voices from the countryside are saying that one copy was given to a parish which has over 500 homes, meaning that inclusion is still a challenge, but we can work around the clock. 4 months now, in the 5th or 6th, we should have turned around this process to a good one.
All right, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are only starting this discussion. When we come back from this break, we will be listening in from our audience, what they have to say and what questions they might have for our panel. Please stay with us here on First the Citizens after this break. Welcome back to this edition of First the Citizens, and we are here discussing the impact of COVID-19 on the education sector. We've taken a beating there, and to help us understand whether we are learning from it or moving forward, we have a panel of very able people. At this juncture, I would like to take it from the audience, and please keep it short and precise to your question. Let's start with the gentleman at the front.
Thank you very much, the moderator and the panelists and the audience. My name is Maxon Muhwezi. I'm a second-year political science student at Makerere University. I'm the chairman of the NRM Makerere University, and I'm the flag bearer of the NRM, the Guild Politics. I have a question to Dr. Turiagenda and the entire Ministry of Education, Shwari. What is the reason of not involving students as majority stakeholders in these technical discussions of opening and not opening?
Thank you.
Another issue.
Just one more.
How do we assess the dangers of having more than 12 million Ugandans, the young people, kept at home or staying at home vis-a-vis the reopening? Because maybe I see a number of markets opening and they are operating at a normal case. No what. I am not exposing the students, fellow students, to health problems. But do we assess the two issues? Which is right and which is not? Someone can easily say it is a political matter.
Thank you, Maxwell. Let's have the next question, please.
Thank you so much, moderator. My name is Munira Nalunga. I work with the Uganda Youth Network. Of course, I reside in Kampala. So mine will go to the representative from the Ministry of Education. So now that COVID-19 has exposed a divide in terms of ICT and how we've embraced it in the education sector, are we also thinking about the long-term solutions in terms of embracing ICT in the whole education sector? Because if we don't embrace ICT now that we've seen the impact of ICT in such situations, we are at a dead end.
My question goes to the Minister of Education.
Okay.
We have elections together with the lessons. We have had the Electoral Commission telling us politicians are going to have campaigns on radios and on televisions. And the Ministry of Education is also telling the people that students are going to have education on TVs and radios. How are you going to program those two so that they do not collide?
Thank you.
And there goes my next question goes to the MPs.
Yes.
We are students at campus. We have some students that look for their own tuition. By the time we are still at school, these students had their small businesses that they could raise their tuition. By the time they closed these institutions, they went back home and used this capital to sustain their life as we are in a lockdown. So by the time universities open, we find that we shall have less than 3 weeks to start exams.
Right.
How are you going to cater for these students so that they get some tuition that they are going to pay?
Thank you.
My name is Agaba Nelson. I come from Kamwenge District, Chibale East Constituency. It seems clear to the public and the Ministry of Education that what they are trying to do, the preoccupation aspect, is not working for everyone. So the utilitarian principle has not come to be passed, because it seems they are doing the greatest good for the greatest minority, and many are affected. Because if you find most of the people, of the population, it is in the countrysides where they cannot access, internet, access TVs and other resources that are available. Right. Even when you went ahead to give a print at a parish level, you're having one print, which cannot be shared by the entire public. So my question is that what are the long-term plans, actually in line with the innovations and in regard to technology, to ensure that next time such kind of pandemic happens, the education sector does not suffer the same fate as we have had?
Thank you. We surely hope the pandemic doesn't happen again, but let's have a next question.
Thank you very much. My name is Akelonga Priska. Now my question is, among the 15 million Ugandans who are in school, we have the group of students with disabilities, and clearly the impacts that are put upon them, and what the ministry is coming up with is radios and TVs and all that stuff. This is clearly not going to cater for these people with disabilities. As the ministry, what do you have in plan for the students with disabilities? Thank you.
Thank you so much, moderator. My name is Alex. I just would like to ask basically the person from the Ministry of Education. The private sector in this country that is also part of the education sector in Uganda, many people who are working in the private sector, in the education sector, really are crying. I don't know whether the ministry has any intentions to help them. Then we have not had any plans. The ministry is telling us how they will resume school. We might be at home, then what next? Are we going to live in COVID days for all the days of our lives? We must be having a plan. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's come back to the panel. And I am sure that all the viewers agree with us that the bulk is for explaining by the ministry.
Unfortunately.
So let's start with the inclusiveness, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Jacob, and the team that has asked questions. I do appreciate that a lot of things are coming to me, because the topic for today is actually around me.
Yes.
With my brothers. I'm so lucky that I'm the only sister, so I'm secure. Now, Mwezi, you talked about not involving students on opening and so on, and other plans. We have a task team of 15 people, and one of the representatives is from the National Council for Higher Education. And our thinking was that a lot of university and tertiary institutions' views would be coming through the National Council for Higher Education. As you are aware, the education sector is the largest sector in the country, and almost every family is a stakeholder in education.
Doctor, are you saying that the National Council speaks to students to pick views?
It speaks to universities and tertiary institutions.
Okay.
And our thinking would be that because at university and tertiary institutions, they have guilds, they have organized systems.
Yes.
And they're actually members of university councils and so on. So we thought that actually a lot of their voice would come through that. But I'm glad he's brought it up.
Just to pick it up there. So it is okay for the Uganda National Students Association not to be represented. It's okay for the Guild Presidents Associations not to be represented, as long as we have a National Council for Higher Education member.
No. I'm saying that we are only 15 on the task force.
Okay, we couldn't expand
we couldn't have everybody on board. Nalunga, ICT divide, and in education, are you doing anything? Yes. We have now a committee on board which is discussing what we call the e-agenda in education. We have had efforts, but they've not been consolidated. And this COVID-19 came in as a blessing in its emergency way. So it has woken everybody up to some of the things we used to take easy. So yes, we have that committee. It's about to finish its work, and it will be presenting its report to the sector so that we can see moving forward, should we be caught off guard anymore? And we think that we won't in future. We have learned a very hard lesson, and we think we are learning from it.
All right.
And you are saying COVID-19, unfortunately, education did not have a budget. I'm sure you've heard all that has gone on under COVID. And part of that actually translated into the one paper per parish, because we had planned for everyone. The budget was for everyone. The material, actually the procurement to New Vision was for everyone. Yes. But we didn't have the money. We had to pick from ourselves as a ministry. So we thought, let's print only 25% for now. And we sent out guidelines to local governments and said, identify among your people that the population you think is not benefiting from radio or television, so that they are prioritized. But you know, as you have cascade of things, I don't think that's what happened. From the reports we are getting,
so
I think it didn't happen.
Should we therefore expect that now that you've seen that the necessity is there, there will be a supplementary budget coming soon from your ministry
We have been submitting requests, and we hope that something can come through to help us.
Parliament is here. They'll tell us.
Parliament is here.
Let's go.
What is this? You didn't tell us your number. You didn't tell us your name. Sorry, so I can't address you by name. He talked about how will we manage the dynamics of using television and radio for both the learning and also the elections. Radios and televisions have programs.
Okay.
And usually when you have very key things to share, they share out the time. So when we submit the next round, because we are coming again actually, and we are now coming again, and government has said, since people didn't have radios, we shall give a radio to everybody. So we hope every family would have at least a radio. But we are coming back again with more material for everyone, because the planning now can take care of everyone. So we are coming again, and we believe that UBC, which is the national radio, will be able to apportion time for the learning and the elections.
Doctor, let me hold you there.
Yes.
We're going to come back to you. It's the bulk for you, but I want to come to the MPs themselves. You're going to have to compete for radio time with education as you do your scientific campaigns. Are you going to give regard to radio programs that are for education, yet you're not reaching your voter in the time you want to?
No, it is two-way. Do you mean the home radio that we use at home, that we switch to politics and education? Or you mean the radio,
broadcaster.
The broadcaster, because many are private.
Yes.
It is government that will have a problem. The private needs both. He needs the politician, they need the education, because government is paying them to broadcast the teaching. So they must create a balance, because the campaigns must go on during COVID, the education must go on during COVID. So the private investors, the broadcasters, will definitely make a balance. They need the money from both people. We expect that there will be the politicians who have their time, especially politicians speak in the evening. It's the best time they will give you, from 7 up to about 9, 10. That's peak for politicians. The students need morning hours when they have just gotten up, when they have just had breakfast.
All right.
Those balances will be made.
Thank you so much. So we will take it from there to Mr. Kaboyo. It seems like the view from the politicians that the ministry here had missed is that they even decide when the TV stations and the radio stations can fix education programs, because the morning, as he said, is the best for learning. Is that something you think is wise for us?
The public has both radio and telephones or mobile phones. Okay. You realize that every mobile phone that one carries, small as it is or smart, has a radio on it. You can listen to a radio. When you have a phone, you don't need to buy a radio.
Okay.
Meaning that government would have become frugal but innovative enough to at least expand telephone coverage and penetration by procuring mobile phones other than buying radios. Okay. Because mobile phones, to me, will also improve the ICT access penetration to the young people in the villages.
So you're suggesting that government buys mobile phones?
Government listening now would alter that procurement from radios to mobile phones, because every mobile phone has a radio component.
So those are smartphones or feature phones?
It could be smart. It could be a mix of smart and non-smart. But as long as the radio component is there.
All right, this is beautiful. Let's
Jacob,
take it to Kumi.
Jacob, let me just say, we actually thought about all these.
Okay.
And one of the responses we got was that when it's a telephone, the father, the head of the family, walks with it.
All right.
To wherever he goes, and the children may not access it at that time.
I want to take this to Kumi because I'm hearing very interesting things. One, we can buy phones for all the young people in Kumi, Honorable Silas, but we can also apportion time for when they can actually learn. Do you think this is considerate of poverty levels in Uganda, but also is it considerate of the fact that people actually don't know how to use these things since they have been in school?
It is not considerate at all. First of all, you know, it is very difficult. It's like you having somebody who has been working in the civil service.
Yes.
And they are telling the person, please prepare for your retirement. At least have a side business. So that by the time you step out of this service here of public, you have somewhere to step in. So this one is like starting a business from nowhere. They give you a loan and then you enter a new business. It will collapse straight away. So for me, my problem is, yes, we are talking about the radios, we are talking about the phones. They all have their challenges.
Okay.
We needed to maturely prepare for the transition. It is highly evident now that there is no way we can deal without technology.
Okay.
But my issue is the shifting, the movement, the transition from where we have been to where we are. And I'm quite disappointed that when we look at the budget for 2020, 2021, ICT is the least. I don't have the exact figures here, but if anybody can research, you'll confirm.
200 and about 30 billion shillings for technology and innovation.
How can we make it the least in priority? Yet it is the one which is carrying the burden brought in by this COVID-19. So it is something so challenging.
All right.
This WhatsApp or whatever the messages, what you give somebody a phone to study with, they see a good picture here, they first abandon your classwork, they are now this or this. What are we going to do? The songs are in the radio, they first started dancing. What are you going to do? So there are so many things. I think there's a lot here to be done.
All right, thank you.
There's a lot.
Thank you. I'm going to cut you short there. Our viewers, it's getting a bit interesting here. The perspectives from our rural areas and our urban areas seem to be totally different, and that is to be expected. First, the citizens will return after this short break. Welcome back to this edition of First the Citizens. On this edition, we are discussing the very important question of education in this country whenever pandemics will strike. And so far, we have COVID-19 to work with. We will be asking now a question that has come in, and I want to come back to the Honorable Agon Silas. There's a question that had to deal with the utilitarian principle of how we are dealing with this. Now, in the education sector, there are also education service workers. And before long, Mr. Kaboyo here will tell you that we are actually having non-payment of some teaching staff because there's no money going into schools. Is there, from parliamentary perspective, is there a necessity to now intervene at a government level to save this critical mass of staff that might be lost to the pandemic because people actually need to survive?
Yes. I think there's totally a big need for that. And I want everybody to agree with me that nearly everything right now as we talk is abnormal. So we are on abnormal-based budgeting.
Okay.
Corona-based budgeting. It is no longer the budgeting that you used to know. I would have even loved to hear from government that one, we have switched off all the funds that we got from 1920 budget.
Okay.
The balances. Would have loved, for me as a member of parliament, that's what I've always asked. What are the balances? What are the savings? We have not traveled inland. We have not traveled abroad. All those savings, where are they? Okay. So that we look at our priorities. And then we say, those who are in the private institutions, they badly need a stimulus. What are we going to do so that we support them?
So
these private school teachers.
Yes.
I just thought I could supplement a little.
Okay.
I have a friend who owns a university.
Okay.
And he still has to pay salary to the teachers at the university. He doesn't know when COVID will end. I have many friends who have private schools. They have to pay salary. Some have stopped. Some universities have actually stopped paying salary for teachers. The teacher you're not paying salary is a parent who also was looking after a home, and this was their earning. Actually, currently, those employed by government that are earning salary, but those employed in the private sector, many are not. You saw what happened to this other radio station. People were. So I agree with you entirely. This time, government needs to come in to shock absorb the private sector. And even the push we are hearing that let's open schools, let universities learn online. It's not necessarily because there's an urgency for students to learn.
Yes.
We can wait up to next year, but there's an urgency to sustain the families of those who are working in the private institutions.
Yes.
I think government should come in and shock absorb them.
Thank you.
So in short, before you take
before
it
I
to
go
the
to
other
doctor.
side, yes.
Yes.
Those who have been in the private sector are currently economically seated down.
Okay.
That is the truth. They need quick kind of emergency rescue from government. So as a parliament, I think the issue is there is a window.
All right.
Remember the Minister Kasaija said, please bear with me when I come back so that we review this budget, recommit it, do this and that. I hope Minister of Education is taking advantage of this window so that you look at these issues.
So, but Honorable, many a citizen would argue that Parliament is the one which appropriates. So why don't you take the initiative and present some sort of bill or some sort of motion to reappropriate the budget that is already on table?
I think that is a good idea. That's a good idea, but I can tell you one thing. Most of these things started from a cabinet. If you are talking about a budget, first of all, who has the mandate to initially dissect and say this one goes to education, this one goes to finance? It is the chief executive.
So you're sticking with mandate?
For us, yes, the mandate. Because constitutionally, you cannot divert from it. You have to stay there.
All right. Let me take it. Honorable Abbas, before you even take it to your perspective, the citizens now expect that we are listening as leaders and we are acting according to necessity. Your honorable colleague said it's abnormal, a situation. So why should we stick with things that are normal in situations where we need some madness?
No, I am very optimistic. I am a progressive person. COVID is here. Some time to come, we shall not have it. We can make modifications to accommodate COVID for now when it is on, but let's not lose the direction where we are going. It definitely, time will come. Either we live with it or we live without it, but it will end.
All right.
So let's not clear everything. Like I disagreed with some people. We did appropriation.
Yes.
So we made the appropriation bill. That's the budget.
Okay.
When it went, that time there was no COVID. When the budget was to be read, we are now in COVID. So we agreed that there should be modifications to accommodate COVID. Even before the budget was read, we had passed some supplementaries to accommodate COVID. So our expectation is that the Minister of Education will come to the floor of the House and we really appeal to them, this time to be receptive and listening. The private sector is hard hit.
Okay.
It's really, really hard hit. Everywhere it is, but private sector in education is hard hit. And if we are saying this is a COVID budget, we are willing to pass a supplementary that will shock absorb the private sector, especially in education, to grapple with COVID.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Triagenda, there is an interesting tale in the country now where if you want to be saved, you will request the president to make a directive. The traders have done it, the taxi people have done it. The education ministry does not seem to realize that if we do not make a presidential directive to have government paying private teachers, we could come back to schools which have no teachers because the teachers need to find a way to live. Have you made an effort as a Ministry of Education to look into those alternatives that do not represent government workers but are critical to the return of education?
Thank you, Jacob. Maybe before I answer that, there was a question on special needs education, which I thought I would respond to from the first round of questions.
On PWDs and how radios are not catering for them.
Yes. Nofiska, I think that's your name.
Priska.
Priska, yes, we do take cognizance of the fact that we have children with special needs. And in fact, in the first lot of the study materials, when they were done, which is the normal practice even for syllabi and whatever, a group sat down and did adaptation for the various special needs education learners.
Okay.
And moving forward, in fact, for this present material they are developing, we have agreed that adaptation takes place continuously as the real material is being developed, because we lost time for adaptation. But we are cognizant of that. And the issue of having for TVs, for example, an interpreter is something that has come through very strongly. The braids, that's one of the budgets we have to make sure that braille material. So we are taking care of them. We have not forgotten them.
Okay.
Education services. Yes, education services, as it were, are being provided by both government and the private sector.
Okay.
And our very good, as the world has called it, policies of liberalization and privatization. And we have a budget. We came up with a sector plan, preparedness and response plan, and it has 3 main strands. The first one is continuity of learning, and this is what we've been trying to do, the discussion we've had this afternoon. The second bit is preparing for reopening of institutions. And that's why we've been focusing in the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, developing guidelines, going back and forth. And then the third one is managing and sustainability of quality education after COVID.
Okay.
So as we talk now, we are acting on both. We are on continuity of learning, but we are also on preparing for opening. And we hope opening will be at some point, we don't know when.
Doctor,
yes,
really
one of
quickly,
the things we have,
really
Chair, Coordinator,
just
we
finish
have a
that.
budget for that plan.
Yes.
And that budget is looking holistically at education.
Yes.
And definitely we are going to present it. So we hope that something can come through for our colleagues who provide education, but not in the public area.
Great. Many will think that your adaptation strategy seems to be a bit of mixed reaction, because the Law Development Center has now been stopped by your ministry from continuing online classes. What would seem like a continuity, which is what you're talking to, or an adaptation, which is what the pandemic requires. How do you relate your plan with what you're doing in the public?
It's very interesting, because we have a lot of information coming through from everybody.
Okay.
And sometimes you don't know whom to believe and whom not to believe.
Okay.
Because in the last top management, which included online discussions by some VCs as part of that top management meeting,
yes,
the minister said it very, very clearly that especially for e-learning, we want to start with universities, because the ground is already clear.
Okay.
And the process is on, and the final decision making is about to happen. Then now this thing comes in, and one of my brothers in parliament raises an issue, but we are sorting it.
Okay, so you're saying that e-learning should happen according to how the ministry sees fit and where it should start?
No, the bottom line is that if there is e-learning to happen,
yes,
every child in that institution should benefit.
Okay.
So the ministry wants the confidence that if Makerere is taking on e-learning, then all the students who are registered with Makerere are learning. So that's the kind of inclusion that we want.
I think, just let me add something she said. The Parliament of Uganda took a position. UCU, after the declaration of lockdown, wanted the students to learn online.
Okay.
And somehow they had been able to maneuver properly up to the speaker. And when they almost had their way, Parliament said, no, we tasked the Minister of Education to stop every institution that they're all equal, whether they have online or not. During COVID, no learning, because that's what government decided. So the intentions to do e-learning, I am sure, would even be accommodated after there is opening on schools.
Okay.
Any maneuvers to let schools operate during COVID lockdown, whether online or not, I don't think government will take them.
Does this apply to only Ugandans who can't afford international schools? Because the national schools are going on fine.
We would like every Ugandan to be treated equally during this lockdown.
Okay.
The fact that one university is able to mount an online platform for its students to learn and the other one cannot, we can't allow discrimination, what you called apartheid in academics.
But there's only one LDC.
Even LDC student cannot study because everyone is in lockdown. I heard about it.
Okay.
I heard about the attempt by LDC to teach online. And if you ask for my opinion or anybody else's opinion, let them wait until lockdown is
not
lifted.
Even lockdown.
Then
me,
people
will say
will study.
What we want is the total abandonment of the process. Let us first be at home with the parents.
And be safe.
There's no education at home.
Let's be safe first.
Let's declare this a dead year. It is an equalizer, so that we start afresh
right.
together.
Thank you.
That is it.
Thank you. I think
but
our
it's Parliament
viewers
which directed the ministry.
Thank you. Our viewers must be wondering why LDC students, average age above 25, should be at home with their parents. But let's go with...
Slow down.
let's go with Mr. Kaboyo. You want to bring in
You
something
see, this is the 21st century.
Yes.
What spells it is ICT.
Yes.
Ideally, those that are not implementing any platform or ICT should be adapting to those that are already moving and not to stop them.
Okay.
I would not vie for stopping. But going forward, I would love to see that the very good programs and strategies that government of Uganda is doing during this COVID are properly communicated to the public.
Yes.
Communication seems to be a challenge that those who communicate sometimes may communicate issues which they think are important but are not so important to the public. So it has to improve, but also a budget review. There has to be a review of the budget, and Parliament should help us to push to the wall so that the common person gets something out of this. Those who are viewing us, as we are discussing COVID,
yes.
What should we do? There is no internet. In the US and Europe, they are discussing how fast is the internet. How have we moved with innovations during COVID? But here we're asking, this family has no food. I have not yet got food. I need this. Can we move faster since we're in a global village?
I'd like to come to Doctor now. There has been a discussion now that has agreed that there's an opportunity to upgrade how we go about education. But there's also in that discussion an attempt to limit that, according to the Honorable, to make sure that people are actually fitting into what timelines we are saying. Don't open online until we have told you to open at all. Do you think that this pandemic has given us any lessons as for going forward with how we should handle education?
Well, I think, as I said, one of the lessons we are learning is that we can no longer think of people coming to a four-wall classroom for learning.
Okay.
That one is very clear.
Okay.
And in fact, in the minister's two statements, she has repeated it again, and she has said learning can happen even at home. Just an example, I have a friend who has a child in S1 and then P5 somewhere downtown. And during this COVID, from the materials, they were given an assignment of making briquettes.
Yes.
So these two boys sat with their mother, they read what was there, they started making briquettes. So she took a picture and sent it to us on WhatsApp and said, see what my boys are doing. So there is learning happening.
Okay.
Now what we need to agree on as a society is that learning is much more than sitting under a lecture room, within a lecture room. But also the innovations, as I mentioned, we are moving forward on that agenda. How long can we sustain this of people not learning? Because they are learning anyway on their phones, they are checking Google, they are doing whatever.
They are learning new music.
They are learning new music. So what we want to really be sure of is, because like for universities, they are actually independent and autonomous.
Okay.
Each university has when they start, they have when they finish. Some have 2 semesters, some have 3. So there's that autonomy in universities.
Okay.
So we are looking at how do we ensure that the National Council, before the lockdown, had already developed guidelines of e-learning. So we think that eventually we shall be able to see them as the first priority in getting into e-learning, as long as they can assure us that even the child in his constituency who is at university can actually access.
Thank you so much. We're pressed for time. I'm going to request that we stick to about 30 seconds of one way forward, starting with you, Honorable Agon.
First of all, government needs to accept that we need to revisit our priorities.
Okay.
Our priority number 1 right now is on the issue of technology. That's where our money should be going.
Okay.
So that we create an equalizer. So let us accept that we must, first of all, stop everybody where we are, stay where you are.
So we invest in education
everywhere
technology.
Across the board. Let government take this time to equip, clean up, make people ready for technology.
All right. Honorable Agaba, what is your way forward?
2 things briefly. One, that National Council of Education now needs to emphasize for any institution to be accredited to be a university, they must have capacity to mount e-learning platforms. This should be what we have learned from COVID, and therefore their students should be trained on how to use them. Whether COVID or not COVID, they should be able to also examine their students through such platforms, because that's the way to go for higher education. 2, government needs to come in handy really to support the private sector and shock absorb, especially the workers, the teachers and other workers in those private universities and schools whose jobs are hanging during the school.
Thank you. Mr. Kawayo, in 1 second.
1 second, NSSF 20% is highly needed. Members of parliament, please. Mr. Byarugaba should release that money. The president should press. Finally, when you look at the market, roads everywhere, schools should open. Then we shall move and improve.
Thank you so much.
Should open.
Thank you so much. Mr. Kaboyo is getting an applause here because of his very human-centric ideas. We thank all our audience members today, very socially distanced.
Not that the others are not human-centric.
Of course not. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of First the Citizens. There is never enough time for First the Citizens. Today, education was also just another proof of that. Thank you so much to our panel, and we'll be continuing this discussion on our Facebook page, First the Citizens on Facebook, and you can come back whenever we return. Thank you, and may God bless you.